We have an entirely new stimulus bill in writing in all of its 2,152 pages of glory. So I've spent all morning researching and reading the legal mumbo jumbo so you don't have to, despite my cat keeping me up and making me tired this morning. I'm feeling pretty good. Anyways, if you appreciate the diligence by the end of this video, please just consider giving the video a like. The bill came out yesterday and is a revision to the $3.4 trillion HEROES Act voted in back in May by the House. This is the House's attempt to put their latest offer in writing to give Republicans something to either vote on or negotiate on. Their latest offer being $2.2 trillion. This package was rumored just yesterday morning to have the size of $2.4 trillion, which I criticized a little bit would cause problems in negotiations, but it actually ended up to be a flat $2.2 trillion. So good job. You know what? Pelosi might be a subscriber on this channel. What up, Nancy? Just to cover our bases here before we go into a summary, let's first talk about the developments this morning so you have the latest information. Republicans have now had about half a day to look at the package, and Pelosi stated this morning that talks have been positive and she hopes that both sides will be able to strike a deal in the coming days. This is a massive shift in commentary over the previous 2 months. It almost seems too good to be true. If I've learned anything over this stimulus journey over the last several months, I'm not going to bet that we're going to see anything voted in by the end of the week, but I do think before the elections is actually very doable at this stage. I really believe that we're going to see some kind of agreement. It's also important to note that if an agreement is reached in the next few weeks, it is very unlikely that this bill exactly will be what's voted in. So the information I'm giving is the most current we have. However, it should be looked at as a step towards a solution, not the solution itself. Things can change, these details can change, but this is the best information we have as of right now. It's kind of like we're negotiating for a car and working our way towards a middle ground. We're in the ballpark of where things might end up, but they will change slightly. I still would not be surprised to see a final package come out to around $1.8 to $2 trillion in total size, which would allow me to say I had one of the best guesses in history, like back in July. The last note before we get into the summary is you'll find another piece I predicted yesterday. There was very little actually taken out of the original HEROES Act. Instead, the dollar amounts generally just decreased. This is great in the sense that whatever your priority stimulus item is, it will still be there in the bill. But this also may cause a little bit more friction in negotiations. Only time will tell. Anyways, let's get into the summary. The first item we're going to break down is enhanced unemployment. This comes out to $600 per week, continued through January 31st, 2020. This would come at a perfect time where the president's executive order for $300 per week unemployment is expiring as we speak. At least 9 states have already expired through this. This would start on September 6th, so there shouldn't be a lapse in coverage if this ends up going through. And this will include self-employed and gig workers, which I don't think has received the recognition that it should have the first time around. It's absolutely historical for self-employed people or 1099 workers to receive any of those benefits normally reserved for regular employees. That is huge. If you're a self-employed individual and you were receiving those benefits, you got to feel somewhat grateful that there was this landmark change. So this round would continue payments for anyone from Uber drivers to certain small business owners to contractors. It includes a lot of people and of course regular W-2 employees. Very exciting if you're in one of those categories and struggling right now. I will say this is one of those areas that we will no doubt see some pushback on the Republican side though. They've been very adamant about not continuing at $600 per week. But again, this is a starting point for negotiations. We have, after all, been told by Democrats that they would accept less than $600 per week in the past, just not as low as $300 per week. Again, only time will tell on this. Next, let's talk about homeowner and rental assistance. This one is quite detailed, so I'm just going to attempt to simplify it as much as possible. For renters, $4 billion will go to housing agencies to help with the current rental epidemic. $5 billion will be allotted to grants for those who are at risk of losing their home or have already lost their home. And $50 billion will go to help low-income renters. That is a huge amount of money and would give a huge runway for funding. Now, we don't know exactly how those funds would be dispersed, but that is a lot of money to potentially spend on the issue. I hope there's some funding also set aside for small landlords who have like 1 or 2 properties, but I haven't seen anything on that explicitly yet either. The HEROES Act 2.0 also contains $21 billion for homeowners to help cover housing costs. Now, this is something that we've seen in other stimulus packages in the past and is quite interesting because it lists housing expenses as mortgage payments, property taxes, utilities, homeowners insurance, and other housing-related costs. This is very open-ended as to what could be considered a housing-related cost. And again, we don't know exactly how this funding would be dispersed. Next, let's cover state and local government funding, probably the most debated topic in all of stimulus land. In the past, Democrats wanted nearly $1 trillion in funding for those areas, where Republicans wanted $0.00. This is important because in most other areas, Democrats and Republicans want the same things, but the dollar amounts just weren't quite aligned. Not here, not for state and local government funding. They are far apart. The HEROES Act 2.0 gives $436 billion in assistance to state, local, and tribal governments and territories. I feel this is actually a pretty fair amount negotiation-wise. They cut what they wanted to spend in half, and it's like a true let's meet in the middle kind of agreement here. What could become an issue in this area negotiation-wise are the smaller items within it. I say smaller because small in this context is like $1 billion or $400 million. And in every other context, that's a huge amount of money. But reading through the bill, some items stand out that could make Republicans scratch their heads a little bit, like $620 million for prisons, $375 million for Violence Against the Women's Act, $250 million for ex-prisoner grants, $95 million for the Patent Office, and much, much more. Now, I'm not saying those aren't worthy causes because I'm sure they are. I'm not on the up and up, but I'm sure they're great causes. But as I'm reading that, I'm instantly thinking, I could see that cause some problems in negotiations, just kind of thinking how that side would think looking at it. So let's move on to small business funding and the Paycheck Protection Program. One of my favorite areas, small businesses. This is one of the most agreed upon areas, and I just wouldn't be surprised if it remained very similar in a past bill. How the Paycheck Protection works in this case is they outline how repurposed and future funding would be allocated. So broken down, at least 10% of total funding will go to small businesses with fewer than 10 employees, to those with loans under $250,000, and to those located in low or moderate income areas. Next, at least 30% of total funding will go towards nonprofits, and at least 50% of total funding will go towards a second round of Paycheck Protection funding. And this is one of the most exciting stimulus items to me, in my opinion at least. With nearly 100,000 permanently closed small businesses in this country and many more closing every single day, it's insanely important that those businesses are able to survive and keep paying their employees. It's just important to keep the entrepreneurial spirit of America alive, and that's just how we keep pushing towards more and more progress. These things all will help future America. In order to qualify for the second round of Paycheck Protection funding, a business must have fewer than 200 employees and show a reduction in at least 25% of revenue this year over last. And the next major item is $225 billion in education funding. This is broken down into $182 billion for K-12 and $39 billion for colleges. This is higher than the amount allotted for the Republican plan, but I don't see this being a big area of disagreement in negotiations. Then next we have $15 billion in funding for the U.S. Post Office. This is another one of those areas that won't have really any disagreement, as there really isn't any change over what we already know and what has been voted in either the Senate or the House. So next up is food assistance. According to research, increasing benefits for food assistance is actually the most effective way to stimulate the economy. This is because generally those on food assistance programs are most at risk to the negative effects of a downturn, and those people on food assistance are most likely to spend the extra stimulated money very quickly. The HEROES Act 2.0 gives an additional $10 billion to SNAP, $450 million to food banks, and $400 million to WIC. If this goes through, it would be an automatic increase in benefits without a request in most cases in most states. Now finally, the last item, everyone's favorite stimulus item, a second stimulus check. The HEROES Act 2.0, of course, contains a second stimulus check, and here are the details. We're looking at a $1,200 check for individuals and a $2,400 check for married couples, both who earn less than $75,000 or $150,000 a year, respectively. There will be a $500 per dependent payment that we're all used to seeing, just like the first round, and generally this is nearly identical to the first round with the exception of TIN or Social Security number status. The HEROES Act 2.0 would allow those with a taxpayer identification number, TIN, to receive a full $1,200 check. This was not the case in either the CARES Act nor the Republican plan. Now, I don't see much disagreement cropping up with the stimulus check either, except maybe with the TIN status portion. I know that was kind of a hot button issue for a little while, a few months back, but again, only time will tell. So that's it. That's the bulk of it anyways. Feel free to ask questions below and I'll answer what I can about this proposal. If you appreciate me taking the effort to go through this, I would be so grateful for a subscription in return. Just click that subscribe button. Anyways, that's all I have for today. I need to get back to my coffee and I hope you have a profitable day.